All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead and get started with today's webinar. I'm Shawn here at Zyxel, and today we're doing some tips and tricks, best practices, and just sort of explaining maybe some misunderstood aspects of the Nebula interface. So for those of you that are new, Nebula is our cloud management platform that allows you to manage all of your customers' switches, access points, and USG Flex gateways through a single pane of glass. As we go through today, feel free to use chat or the Q&A to send in any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer those. Depending on the question and how things are going, I may answer them at the time you send it, or I may hold off and wait till the end to answer it. So the first thing I want to talk about is how Nebula is structured. So this is an area, especially if you're new to Nebula, which sometimes throws people off, is when you're creating your first Nebula organization, it's going to prompt you to create an org and create a site. And what happens is a lot of um, people will put their own company in here as the organization, and that's a mistake. So basically, the way things are organized in Nebula is you have organizations, and under those you have sites. So each organization should be one of your customers. So each customer should have their own organization, rather than putting all of your customers as their own sites underneath your organization. It makes a lot of things easier for you in the long run as you continue to add more and more customers. And in some cases, for some of your larger customers, you may actually want to split them up into multiple organizations. So some of the reasons why you want to do this, one thing here is that licensing. If you ever need to upgrade a customer from the free version of Nebula to the Plus or Pro version of Nebula, that is done on a per organization basis. So basically, you convert the organization from free to Plus or Pro. So obviously, if you have a bunch of different customers under one organization, it can make things quite expensive to be able to add Plus or Pro, because now instead of doing it just for your customer who you need it for, you have to do it for all of your customers. Now, another key thing here when it comes to orgs, it's each organization can only have one owner, and by default, it's whoever creates that organization. And then when you have your organization, you can have an unlimited number of sites underneath it. So I've already kind of touched on this. We'll skip past that. So I just want to kind of show you this little slide from a different deck here to show you, just explain sort of how this looks. So you've got let me turn this on. So you've got your account owner here. That's whoever creates the organization. And then you've got the organization under that. And then you've got sites. You can have as many sites as you want. And as you add customers, you're going to each make them their own organization. So you'll have one account owner for all of your organizations. But then you can have as many sites as you want. If one of those customers needs Plus or Pro Pack, that way you just convert that one in. So be aware, though, again, that all organizations are what are controlled Plus or Pro Pack. So all devices in that organization need to have a license in order to be able to be converted over. So one of the tools we have here, which a lot of people aren't aware of, is we do have a bulk site creation tool. So instead of creating one site at a time, so you've got a customer with multiple sites, it's really easy to create a bunch all at once. So you can create sites just all with a default configuration. You can have them clone an existing site that's in that organization. And then we do give you a template that you can download and fill out, and then use that template as being the default settings that you want for all of those sites that are created using that tool. So now we'll talk a little bit here about the different types of admin levels. So the first one you're going to deal with here is going to be um, admins and account owners. So the owner is, again, the one who's created that organization. Now you can always transfer ownership to another account at some point, but each organization is going to have one and only one owner. So generally, if you're an MSP or handling a lot of customers, generally you're going to want to have sort of a single generic account that's going to have access to that ability there, right? You don't want each of your admins creating new organizations, because then they become the owners, and it becomes sort of a management nightmare if you need to transfer ownership in the future, or if one of those employees leaves your company. And you no longer have access to the email account they were using when they created that org. So generally you will have, the boss, the owner, some sort of generic account that creates those orgs. Now, a key thing here is you can create orgs at any time. So one thing I do suggest is you just go ahead and create a large number of orgs to start, just give them a generic name, generic org 1, generic org 2, generic org 3. And then that way, when it's time to set up a new customer, anybody with a full access admin account can grab one of those existing orgs you've created and start to populate it with sites and devices, as well as rename the org so people know that this org is now being used for an actual active customer. Basically, the owner account has access to everything. So underneath owner, then the next type of admin account you have is somebody that has what's called full access. So when you create the admin account at the org level, you have the ability to designate them as full. So that gives them access to all sites in that organization. Gives them full access for the full configuration of everything in that organization. And you do have the ability to delegate owner's authority to those users. So that is a checkbox when you are creating a new admin. When you're assigning them full access, there is a checkbox to give them ownership privileges. So that gives them the ability to do just about everything the owner can do, with three exceptions. They cannot delete organizations. Only the owner, actual real owner, can delete an organization out of the Nebula interface. A full admin with ownership authority does not have the ability to grant ownership authority to other admins. Only the one true owner can do that. And then only the one true owner can transfer organizations from their account to another new owner account. The next level we have when it comes to admin accounts is called read-only. And as the name implies, you can see all the sites and all the settings underneath that organization, but you cannot modify anything. So this is something that you're going to use, for instance, if you have an admin account that needs access only to certain sites in that organization. This is one way you could do that. You would grant them at the org level read-only access. And then at the site level, you would grant them access to certain sites. And we'll get to that in a couple slides here. The other thing you can do is you can create an admin and give basically their authority to none. They will not be able to see or do anything with any sites or settings in that organization. And again, the reason you would do that is because you want to give them access only to specific sites in that org, and you don't want them to see the general org settings, and you don't want them to see site settings for sites they don't have access to. So now we'll jump down to site settings. So when you're creating a new admin, first you designate the org level, whether they are full, read-only, or none. And then it grants you the ability to do site level. So if you've designated your admin as full access, this won't come up because they automatically have access to all sites. But if they are set to read only or none, you will now have the ability to grant them access at the site level. And just like at the org level, there are several different settings that you can choose for them. And we'll sort of go through those. So the first one is full access. So they will have the ability to access everything in that site that you've given them access to. Read only, pretty obvious here. That is, gives them the ability to see the settings in that site, but not change anything. Monitor only. This gives them access only to the monitor pages in that site. So instead of being able to see everything in the site, they can only see the monitor option, the monitor tab in the Nebula interface. And then we have installer. So the installer setting here is something for, as the name implies, probably something you would give to somebody like a third-party contractor who you've contracted with to go on site and install the physical hardware on the site premises. This gives them the ability to scan the QR code and assign devices to that site. It gives them the ability to remove devices from that site, and that's pretty much it. They won't have the ability to configure anything at that site. You can also set this up to automatically expire at a certain period of time. So again, if you've got, a large number of sites you're dealing with and you're using contracted workers to install these, instead of having to remember to go back into Nebula and remove them after the install is done, you can simply set an expiration date for their access, and it will expire that access at that time. And then the other site level we give you access to here is called guest ambassador. So this is specifically for those sites where they are doing some form of guest access using vouchers. So vouchers are something that's available as part of the Pro Pack that basically generate a unique key that you hand to a user that grants them access to a guest SSID for a certain period of time. So to have the ability to generate new ones, to be able to remove ones that you no longer want out there, to be able to change how much time somebody has, you would grant them the guest ambassador access. And that's the only thing they would have access to is to that voucher page in the Nebula interface. So setting all of this up is pretty straightforward. So I want to walk you through that, right? You go into the admin tab. So it's org level admin tab, and you go to create administrator. You will type in person's name. You will put in an email address for them. So it does require a valid email address. And then you see here, you've got a drop-down menu where you choose full, read-only, none for that admin account's access levels. And if you choose full, you can designate or delegate ownership authority using this checkbox. And then you can choose whether or not you want to activate that account. So if you have set org access to either to none or to read only, you will then have the ability here to set up site stuff here. So a lot of times people miss this is basically once you've set this to none or to read only, a little green button pops up down here with add. So that's where you add the specific sites that you want them to have access to. So you'll click add, and then you've got a drop down where you choose the site that you want them to have access to and what level of access you want them to have for that site. And basically you can add as many different sites as you want. So you can have a user with access to just one site, you can give them access to all sites, and you can mix and match what levels of access they have to those sites. So again, one of the most common problems we run into is different employees at your company have set up and created different organizations for different customers, and you need to consolidate those under a single admin account that's going to be the owner account for all of your customers. Really easy to do. Again, you go into the admin tab here. If there is not already an admin account that you want to use as that new owner, you would then create a new admin account that will become the ownership account. And then you simply go through the different steps here to be able to add them, right? So you go in, you create a new owner, put in their name, put everything up. So you're just like before creating a new admin account. Once you have done that and saved it, you will now have the ability to transfer ownership. So you'll see there's a button up here in the interface called Change Owner. You're going to go ahead and click that. Choose who you want the new owner to be. And there is a checkbox here to make sure, are you sure you're going to want to change the owner because your account is going to lose the ownership access? Confirm with yes, and it is basically done from that point. And it's a very similar process if you want to move devices between different sites or between different orgs. You simply go into the organization-wide settings, licenses and inventory, and devices. From there, you use the checkboxes to select the devices you want to move. And then you're going to use the action button here, click on that, and choose either change organization or change site. It will then ask you to confirm where you want to move it to, confirm that you're correct there, and give it the ability here to keep the interface settings the same or not, and then apply it, and away it goes. And it's the exact same thing with transferring device licenses. You simply go into the licenses tab, select the licenses you want to transfer, and then you choose where you want it to go, and it will go through and then allow you to either just transfer the licenses to general inventory, or during this process, you can select specific devices at the new site or org that you want to transfer the licenses to. So another area where we run into a lot of problems is, or at least a lot of confusion, I should say, is when it comes to activating Pro or Plus Pack. So in order to use Pro Pack or Plus Pack, all devices in the organization need to have a license assigned to them. So if you have 10 devices in the org, you need to have 10 Pro or Plus licenses, and they need to be assigned to each device. So this is an area where people miss a step is they will go and they will add the licenses, but they won't then convert the organization. So it's not going to automatically convert the org from the free version um, to Plus or Pro Pack until you tell it to. So first step is assign the licenses. Second step is tell it to convert the organization. So basically, when you're here on the licenses and inventory tab on overview, where you see organization status, if you're using the free version of Nebula, it will say base pack here. And if you look over here and you see the purchase license button, that is telling you that some devices in your org do not have a license assigned to them. So you need to double check and make sure you go to your licenses tab, make sure every license is delegated to a device, or go to your devices tab and see which device is missing a license. If you've already got a license for it in your inventory here, you can always assign it. Otherwise, you may need to go and buy a new license. Once you have done that and all devices have a license assigned to them, you will see a new button gets added over here on the right called Upgrade Now. So you do need to click that and confirm you want to organize or want to activate the Pro license or the Plus license for it to convert the org over. If you don't do that, it doesn't happen. So we get a lot of customers that go through, buy the licenses, assign the licenses, but they forget to click the Upgrade Now button, so they continue to be using the free version of Nebula. Now, the good news with that is you don't start consuming those licenses until you click that button. So you're not, losing any money, you're just losing access to those abilities. Another area that tends to be overlooked that's really nice here is the trials that we have available for you. So every new org you create gives you access to a 30-day Pro Pack trial that you can use. We have a MSP Pack trial that's available for every new admin account that you create. And then on the security side of things, we have various different security licenses that all have a 30-day license for you to come in here and activate. Now, one area that does cause a little confusion is when you're using the free version of Nebula, there's a little warning up here on the top of the page telling you that you're using the free version of Nebula and asking you to unlock Plus or Pro. So that causes some confusion because you're using the 30-day trial. So you do have access to those Pro Pack features, but it keeps telling you don't. So unfortunately, this is just the way it works. This message only goes away when you're using a paid actual Pro Pack license. When you're using the trial, this continues to stay up there. So don't let that scare you off. If you're confused and you're not sure the Pro Pack trial is currently activated, you can go back to that trials page and it will tell you if the trial is in progress, and it will tell you what the expiration date is or the last date where that Pro Pack trial is going to be active for you. Now, another thing that causes a little bit of confusion with this is that if you have assigned licenses and you have those already ready to go, but you've activated the Pro Pack trial before that, it should automatically activate the Pro once the trial is over. You shouldn't need to go in there and do that. But it does cause some confusion again, because while the trial's going, it's not consuming the actual license, and you still get that pop-up telling you that you're using the free version. Hardware locking. So this is actually a feature we added to Nebula based on feedback of our MSP customers. And a lot of our MSP customers came to us and said, hey, we've got lots of sites, lots of customers. And one of the things we do is, if a customer is reporting an issue, the first thing we do is we swap out the hardware. We swap in a new piece of hardware, we take the old hardware out, see if that solves the issue. And if it does, then we take the old piece of hardware back to the lab and we test it to see if it's a hardware problem with the AP or not. And so they asked us to make it easier to add and remove devices to a site or to an organization to help facilitate this and make it easier. So in Nebula these days, and this wasn't always the case, basically, if you have access to the QR code that's on the belly of the device or that's on the boxes, the assumption is that you are the owner of that device, and it allows you to rescan that QR code and reassign the device to a new site or org. So rather than having to go into the Nebula interface and integrate a transfer, you simply scan the QR code using the mobile app, assign it to the new site, and away you go. The downside of that is that if you've left the boxes at the customer premise, or it's like a hotel situation where the AP is in a room where guests have access to it, um, and they might poke around on it, see the QR code, scan the QR code, and it gives them the ability to then take ownership of the device. Because again, um, the request was to basically allow us to do this. So if that's not something you want, it's really easy to go into Nebula and turn that off. So it is a per org setting. So you go into the org settings and you have a device ownership takeover button right there. And you turn that on. So it's prevent other users from taking ownership of devices using the Nebula app. Turn that on and you can no longer scan the QR code to transfer the device once it's been assigned to an organization. So something to be aware of. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen from time to time. Another recent feature we added just in, I think this last year, was alert aggregation. So one of the nice features with ProPack or with our MSP pack is you can set up alerts for when a device goes offline. So that way, an access point or a switch goes down, you get a push notification so you can jump on it and fix it for your customer before they call in to complain. Unfortunately, one of the most common causes of a device to go offline is, the internet connection for the building goes down or there's a power outage. And suddenly you're getting, if you've got 30 devices in that customer site, you're now getting 30 pop-up messages alerting you that 30 devices have gone offline. So the solution to that is what's called alert aggregation. Now it is off by default and you do need to turn it on, and it is a site-wide setting. So you go under site-wide, configure alert settings, and you can turn on aggregation right there. So now instead of getting a pop-up notification for every device, you get a single pop-up notification for the site telling you how many devices went offline and the name of the site where they went offline. Um, So another area to talk about here is static DHCP. Nebula gives you two different ways to do static DHCP or to assign a static IP address to a device. Um, so there is both of them are designed to be used in different situations. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it here. So the first way to do it and the easiest way to do it is you go into the Nebula and pull up the client page. It shows you every client device that's on the network or has been recently on the network. And you can simply put a checkbox next to any devices that you want and select the reserve IP function from the policy rules here. And that will lock in the IP address they currently have. So it's a really handy, easy way to do this, to give a device a fixed IP address that's never going to change. The downside of using this is it doesn't let you specify what that IP address is. So the other way of doing it is called the interface page. So this assumes you're using a Zyxel gateway as the router, and you go into the interface page for that router, whether it's a USG Lite 60, whether it's a USG Flex, and there is a static DHCP table that you can set up. So this allows you to manually specify the IP address for each device. The downside of doing it this way is that you have to know the MAC address of the device. So you may need two windows open, one on the client page and one on this page, so you can go in and copy and paste the MAC address for your specific clients into this. So a lot more flexibility here, a little bit extra effort that goes into it. So a common question we get is, well, what if I've specified one thing under the interface page and another thing here under the client page? And the answer to that is the interface page takes priority. This is going to override whatever you've set here on the client page. So be aware of that. When it comes to cloud management, we do need the ability for our Nebula devices to send traffic out. So these are not ports that need to be open for inbound traffic, but they do need to be open for outbound traffic. So for most networks, this isn't an issue, but for some customers that are really big on security and really big on controlling what goes out, just be aware these ports you see up here on the page itself, these ports need to be open. There's just a handful for you here. There's like 6 that need to be open. So in order for the devices to talk to the cloud server, you need ports 6667 and 4335 open. For HTTPS, so this is access to the Nebula web portal, the ability to do firmware upgrades, to use our cloud authentication server. it's port 443. And then to do the time sync, and this is really important for netconf to work, UDP port 123 needs to be open. And then lastly here, if you're using VPN functionality, ports 4500 and 500 need to be open. And if you just Google like Zyxel Nebula ports, it should, one of the first links from Google should be a page that has this information on it. Another thing here to talk about here is when it comes to our wireless access points, this is probably just APs in general, one of the most frequent calls our tech support gets. So there's some topics here that they've asked me to talk about. So one of the first things that causes maybe some confusion for some people out there is when you go into the Nebula interface for the APs, the radio settings, you could set the maximum power for broadcast on each radio. And this causes some confusion for some people here because then they'll go into the status page and they will see that the device is not broadcasting at the power that it was set here. So why is that? And the answer to that is because this is a max setting. So your access point may not actually be capable of achieving these data rates, right? So it's just a generic list of max power settings because it's generic for all of the different access points that we offer. So if you've set it to 30, but your access point only supports 24, 24 is going to be the maximum output power. The other reason you may see a discrepancy here is because the FCC has different rules for maximum power on certain channels in the 5 and 6 gigahertz spectrum. So 2.4, all channels have the same output power limitations. For 5 and 6, they do not. So depending on which specific channel you are using, there may be a different maximum power output so that we have to enforce to maintain FCC compliance. So be aware of that. Another thing that it seems obvious maybe for most people but tends to get overlooked is access points have the ability to do multiple SSIDs, and generally what you use this for is to provide different access levels to the network, right? So you may have an SSID for your employees and a different SSID for guests visiting that location, or you may use multiple SSIDs to control access to different network resources for different employee levels, right? So someone in accounting doesn't need access to, for instance, maybe the warehouse network devices. Guys out in the warehouse don't need access to accounting servers and hardware, et cetera. So you'll put them each on their own different SSID. But be sure here, this is important, that you put them on different VLANs. We have had people do this. They set up multiple SSIDs and then call our tech support saying, hey, why is it not controlling access? Because they've forgotten that you do need to use VLANs to then enforce that isolation on the wired network, and your wired network needs to be able to support VLANs for this to work. Now, we do have some ways, if you have a network that for some reason you can't use VLANs, maybe the customer's got existing non-VLAN aware switches and they don't have the budget right now to replace those, is we do have some other things we can do to help isolate traffic across multiple SSIDs. So one of the things we can do is our access points have the ability to host their own DHCP server on a per SSID basis. So you can set up each SSID to be on its own NAT and be on a different subnet. So that dramatically reduces the ability of those users to be able to see and access devices on different subnets that are available on the different SSIDs. We also have the ability to do what is called layer 2 isolation, which is a really common tool to use to allow guest networks on non-VLAN aware networks. So what this does is this blocks all outbound communication from a wireless LAN client from the access point unless you have whitelisted the MAC address for that device. So it basically allows you to choose which devices on the network they can send traffic to. So you can limit it just to the WAN, so they only have access to the internet. You can whitelist maybe a shared file server you want them to have access to, or whitelist a network printer so they can print documents for you. But they wouldn't have the ability to send traffic to any other device on the network. Now, do be aware that this is outbound only. So they are still going to be able to see any multicast packets that are sent across the network because those will be sent to all devices on the network. So if you're running some sort of scanning tool, it will be able to find and determine at least some of your network, basically any network device that's sending out multicast packets, but it will not be able to interface with that device because it won't be able to send any packets back to interface with it. But be aware that you will be able to see these other devices that are sending out multicast packets and the contents of those multicast packets. So when you go into the SSID settings, we actually have a toggle called guest network. So when you turn that on, it will automatically enable layer 2 isolation, and it will enable intra-BSS blocking, which blocks wireless users from being able to send data to other wireless users. Just remember, if you turn this on, you do need to go into the layer 2 isolation settings, and you need to whitelist, something for them to have access to. Otherwise, they won't be able to access anything. So when it comes to troubleshooting wireless LAN, probably one of the most overlooked tools is the channel utilization graph. So we're able to graph out channel utilization on the 2.45 and 6 gigahertz radios of access points. And this is by far the most common cause of customer complaints about signal quality, packets being dropped, hey, the Wi-Fi sucks, what's wrong? And usually what happens is the channel utilization is too high. So this should be one of the first things you check when you're troubleshooting wireless users to figure out what's going on. So why would channel utilization be high? Too many users on a single access point. Maybe you need to enable load balancing to help try to push those users off. It may just be there's too many devices using that same channel and you need to change the channel that the access point is using. And unfortunately in 2.4, there's so little spectrum available. Um, it really helps to push those users to 5 or 6G. Wireless roaming. So a lot of people don't realize this, but wireless roaming is handled by the client, not by the access point. It is the client device that determines when it jumps from one access point to another access point. And so it's up to the vendor to decide the algorithm that's used to determine when to make that jump. And some devices, in particular, historically Apple devices, do not want to roam. Apple devices are famous for connecting to an access point, and even when there's like no signal available, they still don't want to jump and scan to see if there's another access point they could jump to with the same SSID. So we do have a feature in there called assisted roaming, as well as 802.11r. K and V, so you can enable these. So 802.11r is fast roaming, so it reduces the handoff time between access points. And assisted roaming K and V allows the access point to say to the client, hey, you should probably disconnect. We can barely see your signal. There's probably something closer to you. Unfortunately, a lot of client devices either don't support K and V or their implementation ignores the assisted roaming. So what do you do? So we have a feature called smart steering. So what smart steering does is the access point monitors the signal strength of each client. And if the client's signal drops below a threshold that you define, it will disconnect the client and block them from reconnecting for a brief period of time, with the hope that it triggers the wireless client to do a refresh scan of the RF environment and try to connect to a different access point that would give them a better signal. So this has some default settings in the smart steering that we have in there by default for you. Those are not best practices settings to use. They're just default settings that are there. So our sales engineer, Marcus, suggests, at least as a starting point, that you change those to these here. So 2.4, set the signal threshold at -69, 5 gigahertz, set it at -72, and at 6 gigahertz, set it to -75. Now, this is going to depend a lot on the RF environment and the client devices themselves, what the best one is. But this is where we suggest you start, and then you may need to tweak it up or down based on the behavior of the clients to get it to the best for that individual application. So one cool feature we have in our switches is an automatic VLAN setting. Basically, it can automatically assign a VLAN to a device, based on what's called the OUI. So the OUI is the first, I think, 6 digits of the MAC address, and those 6 digits are exclusive to a certain vendor. Basically, it's a vendor ID. So you can say, anytime they plug in a Stellaview VoIP phone, I want you to put it on the VoIP VLAN. Anytime they plug in a Dell laptop, it goes on the Dell laptop VLAN, etc. Now, just like with the static DHCP, there are two different implementations in Nebula to use. The first one is what's called voice VLAN. So pretty obvious here, this is designed specifically for voice VLANs. It doesn't actually have to be used for that function, but it's been optimized for that. So you go in, you set what your voice VLAN ID is, you set the priority, and then you choose the OUI. So we have a nice drop-down menu of all of the common VoIP hardware providers, and have those all pre-programmed in as a drop-down menu. So you can simply choose the OUIs here, and we give you the ability to put multiple different OUIs in there. And then you're basically done. It automatically then, anytime you plug in one of those devices, will automatically assign it to the VLAN you've specified here. The other way we have to do it is just vendor ID based VLAN. So this one is based on the OUI and doesn't have a dropdown because this is intended to be used for more than just VoIP devices. This can be used for any type of network device. So, there's just too many different types of vendor devices out there, and the dropdown would just be too gigantic. So you will need to figure out the OUI yourself. Again, it's usually the first 6 digits of the MAC address. And then you again choose the VLAN you want them to assign to, the priority they get, and you can set up multiples of these, each pointing to a different VLAN. So it's a nice handy feature to have here. Another area that causes some confusion is storm control on our switches. So our switches are designed to create a log alert when too many packets come in on a specific port. The default setting is 100 packets per second. And for most of you out there, that is too low. I've been told certain like Facebook pages can generate easily more than that just by loading up refreshing a Facebook page. So our sales engineers suggest changing this to 200 or 300 packets per second. And the reason for this doesn't really cause any actual issues for most people. It's just an alert. But we do get a lot of users calling in saying, "Hey, I'm looking at the logs. There's all these broadcast storms in the alerts. What am I doing? What's causing it, etc." So again, that's usually just caused because the default setting is too sensitive. So if you don't mind a bunch of broadcast storm alerts in your log files, don't need to change anything. But if you want it to be a little bit more accurate, so when you see an alert in there, you know that maybe you need to actually investigate it. Change that default from somewhere between 200 to 300 from the 100 it's set at. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, people. Thank you for sticking with me this long. I do want to talk about Zyxel's AI chat. So we do have an AI chatbot that's part of the Nebula interface. And like most AI chatbots, I find it's not that great. It's great at sounding confident and providing you a summary of stuff, but I find, especially if you're looking for help in Nebula and configuring network things, it's not detailed enough to help you out, or it is detailed enough, but just the chat form factor is the wrong form factor for presenting that information. So what I use it for instead is to find links to the correct supporting documents. So rather than type in, a conversational type thing, I just type in the name of the feature or setting I'm trying to learn more about. Like, I don't know where static DHCP is, or I do know where it is, but I don't understand the different setting options. Just type in the feature name, skip past the paragraph or two of response it gives you, and our AI chatbot will then provide links to where it found this information. So that's what I then use. I then click through on these links. So I find it really handy to get the actual proper documentation, right? Because unfortunately with Zyxel and Nebula, there's so many different types of support documents. There's release notes, there's the giant 300-400 page user guides. There's one for Nebula, there's one for APs, or maybe different ones for different generations of switch. So I find this a very quick and easy way to find the right support document that I need. I can click to it and it takes me right to where all the information I need is at. And with that, we are done with today's presentation. So again, if you have any questions, now's the time to send them in using chat or using Q&A. So far, I do not see that any have been sent in. Now, if you do have something you'd like to talk to me about, my email's up there on the screen. It is Shawn R, SHAWNR, at Zyxel.com. Or, of course, you can always reach out to your sales rep, Andy, David, or Jacob, depending on where you are in the country. Still not seeing any questions coming in. So I am going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you did have a question, feel free to send it directly to me or send it to your salesperson. And they can contact me or contact our sales engineer to get you an answer. But I do thank you for joining us today, and I hope I see you at one of our future webinars.